ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the first edition of the Next Generation Internet of Things and Edge Computing Strategy Forum. We are here today with top experts from across several domains to identify and discuss priorities, challenges, and opportunities that will help shaping a commonly shared agenda for strategic restart and development of our economy and society. Today, we will have top experts that will help us identifying how can Europe exploit its strengths and important industrial sectors in order to position itself in the next generation IoT and edge computing scene. We will discuss what are the most important trends and emerging concepts to drive the development of open platforms for the IoT and edge computing. We will try to identify how European actors compete with the global players in the emerging cloud to edge to IoT ecosystems. You are part of this ecosystem and you will help us shaping not only the agenda but the future of this important digital transition. My name is Monique Calisti. Some of you might know me. I'm the EU IoT coordinator, and it's my pleasure today to guide you throughout the agenda. Be indulgent with us. We're running remotely. It would be much nicer to be all in the same room where you would see my, live mistakes and movements. Well, let's be virtually all together in the same room today. So here you can see in the slides a quote from a main event that happened beginning of March and that gathered already prominent experts from the IoT and edge computing domain. And this is a statement, this is a starting point for us today. So edge computing is the logical evolution of the dominant cloud computing model, avoiding the transfer of mission critical data to the cloud, supporting resilience, real-time operations, security, privacy, and protection, while at the same time reducing energy consumption and carbon footprint. In edge computing, the processing moves from a centralized point closer or even into the IoT device itself, the edge or periphery or a network. Basically, edge computing is the way in which data stays closer to the users and closer to where the value of data is generated. In this first session, we will have two representatives from the European Commission. Why it's not going to the next. Here we go. We will have, I hope this is not disturbing you, the top part, and you can see the title. Can you see?
We can see it properly, everything.
Okay, great. We will have Pearse O'Donohue, Director for the Future Networks Directorate at DigiConnect from the European Commission, and we'll have Max Lemke, Head of Internet of Things Unit at the European Commission. But before we start with them, let me remind you a couple of things because, even if we're not here, even if we're not in the same physical place, we have to share the common virtual room we're being hosted. So first of all, the plenary session will be recorded and published for events attendees only on the event platform. So in case something, it's not, if you don't feel comfortable, please be aware of that. Then feel free to post your questions and comments on the live discussion chat. Remember, this is your event, it's our event. So your observations, your questions will help us animating the event. Finally, please help us making visible what we are discussing today and amplifying the messages that we're trying to convey by making noise on the social media and possibly echoing the NG-IoT channels. The hashtag for the event is NG-IoT Edge Forum. And please, if along the course of action you're experiencing some technical problems, don't hesitate to contact our help desk at info@ngiot.eu. Now, It's my pleasure to welcome on stage or on screen Pearse O'Donohue, Director for Future Networks at DG Connect from the European Commission. Thank you very much. And Pearse, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Monique, and good morning to everybody. And it's great to have you here participating in this very important event for us. So as with so many of the meetings that you've been in and conferences you may have participated in, I can't help but start with a brief nod towards COVID, which has put us in this virtual situation today. But we do have to reflect on how the crisis over the last year has really heightened the significance of digital technologies and increased our reliance on digital technologies. So they are crucial for Europe's economic and social resilience. So we now need to, as it were, take the advantages out of this terrible situation and ensure that moving forward we have a vigorous digitization policy and that we enhance the take-up and also innovation in these technologies, because they are actually an essential component of the industrial recovery and of the economic recovery of Europe from the COVID crisis. So all of Europe, including in particular our industries, they have to really grasp the potential of the digital age. And that is why the Commission very recently set forward an ambitious policy roadmap, which is the Digital Decade communication, which we issued in order to set out targets for actually moving us fully into this digital age. We want Europe to be digital and we want Europe to be green. So those are the two key objectives, the twin objectives that the Commission has. But of course, we have to take note of what else has happened because of the COVID crisis, because it does show that in some cases, Europe, we are dependent on third country suppliers for some critical technologies. And unless we take steps, that dependence may in fact increase as the pace of technology innovation increases. So what we need to prioritize and what I'd like to focus on today are three areas before my colleague Max gets into more detail on some of them. And that is connectivity, microprocessors, which do some of the work in the new computing environment, and of course, data, because it is all about the data. It's not for the sake of the technology, it is for what we do and how we can best use and reuse the data. So in the digital decade that I referred to, the compass that we set out, that translates our ambitions into very specific targets. So it's quite concrete in what we want to achieve. Now we have to fill in the details as to how we achieve that. We want digitally skilled citizens and of course, highly skilled digital professionals in order to drive the digital economy in Europe. We need secure, high-performing and sustainable digital infrastructures. So that's from 5G through the new access networks to actually the semiconductors and components that make up the new IoT and peripheral equipment in which so much of the computing and the data processing will take place. The digital transformation of businesses, especially SMEs, is the other big challenge that we have. Large companies are making their own way, but that huge amount of small enterprise that exists in Europe needs assistance, needs guidance, and needs security and clarity. So just this week, the Commission has published our strategy on artificial intelligence. That's another step in setting out a framework for how we will create a framework that supports the use of new technologies, and artificial intelligence will be at the center, while at the same time creating clear legal protections so that users are safe and protected, but also so that those companies who wish and can innovate in this sector know exactly the template that they have to work to, know exactly what their responsibilities are, but also can be confident that in Europe at least they will not be undercut by providers of technologies that do not meet the rules that protect the users, that respect personal data and so on, which we will insist on with strong legal provisions with regard to the use of artificial intelligence. Next week, the Commission is going to be reviewing its industrial strategy, issued last year to already see how we need to focus that, particularly in terms of COVID, but as the geopolitical as well as the technology situation evolves. So those are the big picture issues. But of course, underlying that is something that is not new, but constant, but which has to adapt and be articulated in terms of the new technological developments. And that's particularly when we say we are building a framework on European values, we have to see how protection of the individual, protection of personal data, respect and encouragement of the participation in the economy and society of minorities, of those with handicaps, etc., that they are all things that we are looking at as we build this new digital Europe. So we do have several other pieces of legislation that were put in place over the last year, sorry, in terms of proposals at least, and they create the framework for that. But as I've said, all of this effort is focused to a large extent on the data, which is at the heart of our policies. It's of strategic importance to Europe and all of European companies and businesses in all sectors. And it is crucial that as we talk about IoT at the heart of these efforts, that we recognize that the sensors, that the peripheral equipment, and that the computing power that IoT increasingly represents is prevalent and will be in all sectors of the economy. This is just no longer about the technology sector, the ICT sector, about preaching to the innovative. This is about the use of IoT in mainstream activities in transport, in agriculture, in logistics, and industrial distribution, and all of the other sectors that you care to mention. So we have already from the start of this commission been addressing the issue of data and data policy. We issued a data strategy last year, February 2020, which puts down the vision that we have with regard to data, including and particularly having a federated cloud edge continuum in Europe that would encompass high levels of data protection, safety, security, and let's remember from the start, energy efficiency, so that it meets that other twin objective of this commission, while ensuring portability standards, transparency in contractual and technological conditions, and also then, of course, ensuring that we are able to move to a decentralized data processing ecosystem, which is closer to the user, because that is where all of the innovation will take place. That is where all the benefits to all of these different sectors in Europe will be felt, as I've said, as there is greater ability to collect data, to analyze it, to process it close to where the activity is, in order for, in real time in many cases, that analysis to then feed back into the process to make it more efficient, safer, more environmentally friendly, less wasteful of resources, and so on and so on. It also, of course, creates a situation in which there can be significant secondary activities generated from the data that is collected and processed through this cloud, edge, and IoT ecosystem. Now, that's fine if it were all about talking. There is actually a very concrete challenge that we must meet. And for that, even though it is only a tip of the iceberg, the European Union will invest up to 2 billion euros as of this year as part of the Digital Europe programme, the Connecting Europe facility, as well as our research programme, and of course the recovery funds for COVID, in order to prime the pumps for the development of these technologies. The member states will of course play a very important role in complementing these investments, making sure that they can be focused at member state and regional level. And that is again part of the efforts under the Recovery and Resilience Fund that has been created to kickstart the economy after the economic crisis caused by COVID. In particular, we are looking at creating a European Alliance for Industrial Data and Cloud, as well as another industrial alliance on microelectronics, to bring together a wide range of European stakeholders, member states, but particularly the industrial actors, to make sure that we have those critical economies of scale within Europe to develop the technologies together, to develop the use cases which will create demand, and that will in itself generate more economies of scale for the development in Europe, of those technologies, their application, but also the development of a competitive European industry on a global scale. Another initiative, and we will be coming back to this again in this context, which the Commission is not responsible for, but which is playing a very important role already, is that of GAIA-X. That has become already a flagship project. It was led at the first instance by Germany and France, but it's now expanding into all of Europe and beyond. And already European industry has stood up to the plate, is taking ownership and taking control. And we'll be hearing later on from Hubert Tardieu from the GAIA-X Foundation, who will explain the very important role that GAIA-X plays in setting the standards and helping to create the standards and technological references in which all of these technologies can actually work together and work together at a European level to be federated so that we are getting these economies of scale. Very important developments all around. The alliances that I've referred to may also be linked to important projects of common European interest in which member states with their industries will focus on very specific elements of technology for the future in cloud, in edge, in microprocessors. We're working closely, for example, with the German and French ministries in order to look at specific needs for future edge technologies, where Europe, again, can take the lead, but can only do so if we work together with a very focused, disciplined, and costly innovation effort. There you are. In the funding program to actually deploy these technologies, the Digital Europe Fund, for example, we are looking to invest in cloud to edge infrastructures. We are, of course, supporting the common European data spaces and the testing and experimentation facilities, all of which will again provide the environment, most particularly from our perspective, by allowing them to interoperate, to work together, and to ensure that there is not a duplication of effort, as they will then support key vertical industries right across Europe. Again, the examples I've given of mobility and farming, as well as manufacturing, but also if you think about the health sector and the health applications, which are going to be critical in the Europe to come. So there you are. The Internet of Things is growing at a very rapid speed. It looks to us as if there will be a global market for IoT well beyond $1.3 trillion by 2026. That's a very significant increase from the current valuations. And we also see, of course, an exponential increase in the volume of data and the need for data processing. That's where, as I've said, edge computing comes into it. It is the next step because it is computing that is and processing close to where the data is created. If you just take a connected device, a smartwatch, a home gateway, a smart meter, or of course, sensors, robots, and other equipment in a factory setting. So that is where we move from what we have been just recently becoming comfortable with, which is the concept of cloud computing, into one that is where largely the efforts have been in centralized data centers, where we're now looking at quite a strong presence of a small number of global companies, none of which are European, which account for about 80% of global revenues, but which is a relatively static commodity-based infrastructure as a service to a large extent. And now we see the transition to cloud intelligence. We see the evolution provoked by Internet of Things and the next generation of IoT towards much more distributed computing concepts, such as swarm intelligence, which would be one of the focuses of the European IPCEI. All of those next developments, which is where Europe can hopefully get back to the forefront of leadership. We're not going to try and build a competitor to the hyperscalers that provide these large infrastructure as a service facilities, who, by the way, are a very necessary and important element in ensuring cloud computing in Europe and will always be welcome here. But no, we need to ensure that Europe has a head start in the next generation so that we can compete, grow, and innovate. And also particularly that we can create the sort of business-to-business environment, platforms for industrial IoT, which will be key to digitizing all sectors of the economy, in particular industrial sectors. But then, as I said, moving out to farming and energy and so on. So there's a huge opportunity for Europe because in some of the domains that we're talking about, European industry has been in the lead. We have perspectives for developing new technologies using Europe as a single data space where there will be economies of scale for investment at a very high scale, for cooperation and federation, and then of course for innovation and ultimately productivity and competitiveness. That is a vision which we need you, all of the audience today, to help us in realizing. We also, of course, have to ensure that we are harnessing the best technical expertise in order to be at the forefront, which is again why we need to centralize our efforts while recognizing that there are very important local and regional initiatives within Europe that are helping us to build this secure, modern, and innovative cloud edge continuum for the future. So there you are. In the next 2 years, we expect also to be funding through Horizon Europe a significant amount of research on cloud to edge to IoT. And we will be having specific discussions with those involved in this research effort to ensure that the technology is coming through from the initial stages so that it can then be harnessed and deployed in Europe and by European companies. All of what I've said should convey a huge sense of urgency. We do have in, shall we say, the silver lining of the COVID cloud, an opportunity to seize this one-time opportunity in Europe to bring all of our actors together, to focus our financing and spending, focusing the expertise that exists so that we can, by 2025 and onwards, be really seen to be winning the edge and far edge to swarm computing race. Thank you very much, and I look forward to a very exciting day.
Thank you very much. I'm waiting also a couple of seconds after our speakers are finished because we have some delay between the two platforms, but actually it was a very dense introduction, Pearse, as always very inspiring. A call to action for all of us today here. We have an opportunity and we cannot miss it. Clearly, technology is much more than just something that we're using in our everyday life. It has become part of our living, and it has become, especially in recent pandemic times, the only way we can access safely a number of essential services. Which of course the Continuum Cloud Edge IoT is enabling, from healthcare to education and you name it. Now with Max Lemke, our next speaker, we will go more in details in a number of aspects that concern very much the technical and strategic priorities for the development of next generation Internet of Things and edge computing. Max, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Monique. Thanks, Pearse. So welcome, everybody. It's great to have you here in this online event. Thanks, Pearse, for the excellent overview. I will pick up from there, but before that, I want to just say we have 400 registrations. That's quite impressive. We know in online meetings, not everybody will come, not everybody will be there all day, and some people will just listen. But 400 still, I think, shows a great interest in this. What did we do before this? We started off with a small meeting of 11 experts, and we just thought and discussed at what we called a fireside chat on the next generation and IoT computing and what should be Europe's strategy. Today, this is one of the major events of my unit. We are going outside, we are going broad. So we would like to discuss with you and have your views on it. So I would recommend that even you may diagonally have a quick look at the fireside chat report, which is around 10 pages, which is available on the website. So that may inspire you, but I will also tell some of the things that are in there. So next slide. I will start off with where Pearse stopped more or less. We have a European data strategy, and the European data strategy has two key pillars: the cloud actions, the cloud rulebook, and the co-investments in cloud to edge federation on the left, on the one side. And on the other side, we have to bring our data together in European data spaces. And there we have a legislative side to clarify the rules, the governance, and we have the implementation side, the co-investment in the data spaces. So that are the two. On the cloud, we have the European Alliance for Industrial Data, Edge and Cloud. On the data spaces, we will build common European data spaces in sectors, in different sectors like agriculture, manufacturing, mobility, and many more. And this is a coordinated approach between us from the Commission side with the member states. And there are key initiatives like GAIA-X and Hubert, and Boris Otto will tell more about it, play a key role, like in the role of federation and interoperability standards coming out of GAIA-X, and also in particular looking at particular use cases. And we will see more about that soon. Next. Now, in terms of implementation, and that's basically now delineating and positioning what we do here and what is done elsewhere. So we see the implementation of these data spaces, the top yellow box, these different data spaces driven by stakeholders and providing a rich pool of data. This will be implemented through the Digital Europe program, which is a deployment program. It's not a research program. So we are already a step further in providing this data and the technical tools for pooling and sharing. Same on the cloud side. We want to create a marketplace for cloud to edge based services for all sectors, which have certain characteristics. And with this, we would like to federate the European cloud and HPC infrastructure and services, ranging from edge infrastructure to high performance computing, but also trying to incorporate AI through AI on demand platform, to the AI on demand platform of tools through the testing facilities. So that's the picture. This is supported through the deployment and infrastructure programs. And that's important here to note, and also through the Recovery and Resilience Fund and the IPCI. Next slide. We now go into a time frame 5 years from now. And if I now take this down technically, I provided this very simplified view of cloud edge IoT. So we see the cloud and HPC infrastructure, we see the edge cloud in the factory, in the airport, I would even say in your car, in a hospital, and we see the far edge devices, the IoT smart devices who get smarter and smarter, and who also have computing power in future, and who have, I would even say, sometimes high performance computing power in the device. And we see a trend, a paradigm shift that we expect, that the computer, that when you look at the future, cloud will increase, but edge and far edge will even more increase. So we see a paradigm shift towards the edge, and we see the compute resources have to move closer and closer to the data in order to be able to process the data. We see already business cases coming out of that through the federation of edge resources via ad hoc networks, ad hoc 5G networks, for example, along major highway corridors and in this direction. So we see, so when I see at what happens today, the two boxes, the two right boxes, edge cloud, cloud HPC, that's happening today. We have service provisioning through the hyperscalers, through the infrastructures that work on the basis of GAIA-X, through the European Cloud Federation. So that is happening, the right two boxes. Now on the left side, you have the word far edge. We have many different words that appear there. We have IoT devices, we have the word fog. And there is the European opportunity as we see it in 5 years. So to bring the cyber physical systems and the Internet of Things into this game of a compute continuum. And that is not yet happening today. Next slide. So to present in one slide what we have in mind is with a 5-year plus research and innovation perspective. So that is what we are looking now. Now we look into Horizon Europe, we look at the next 5 years. So what I have presented so far was deployment infrastructure. Now we look into research, pave the ground for the next generation. So building the foundation for the next generation of GAIA-X and EU Cloud-edge Federation. So I already said we have this shift, as I said, from cloud to edge. And we will go beyond cloud edge service provisioning. It's not only service provided by telcos, by hyperscalers, but the user will be incorporated in that who owns the IoT devices. So incorporating the power of IoT devices and systems in the compute continuum, bring the computing power to where the data are, and also make possible artificial or intelligence in general at the edge and at the far edge in the devices directly. You could have, for example, a smart device at home with an elderly person who analyzes itself the status of that elderly person. It doesn't communicate all the data to the cloud, but just communicates the conclusion to the cloud. Yeah, and we will see new paradigms for decentralization, like, for example, swarm computing. There we will see that in future you don't program one device, but you program a group of devices, a swarm of devices who would act together in a decentralized fashion without having a central instance who controls them. And that would enable real-time processing, convergence of the IoT and cyber physical systems. And I said you will have many applications that like in farming, you would do real-time analysis of the status of a plant through the agricultural machine, and then define the doses of water, fertilizer, or pesticides that you give to that plant directly on the go. For that, you need real-time, and you will serve the environment, and you will serve the productivity. Or I explained the patient at the home, it's not only privacy protection that data is processed at the home itself, but it also reduces the energy footprint because less data has to be sent to the cloud. And there are many other applications like that. One that always strikes me, which is I think one of the coming one in energy, is the local optimization of renewable energy that is produced locally versus the use in the smart home and through EV charging. So that's one of the big ones that is coming. So what we need to do is we need to exploit EU strengths in application and system engineering, knowing the application. And I would see that in cloud computing services, they are largely general purpose and often application agnostic. When we go to the edge, we see strongly customized edge and far edge computing towards the application. But you can only do that if you know the application, if you know the user, and if you have the trust by the user. So that's a new opportunity for European industry, a new generation of IoT and edge computing, a next generation of orchestration platform systems for IoT and edge computing. And if we don't bring that into industrial platforms with business models and marketplaces, then we will not create ecosystems. So what is important is the next generation of industrial platforms and ecosystem. So what we are promoting here is to prepare this now. And therefore, we complement the deployment and infrastructure measures that I have presented before briefly in the digital CEF2 and other programs, also by member states, by 150 million under Horizon Europe for developing and piloting this next generation cloud edge IoT. And 55 million of this will be available for calls that close already in September and that we will publish in the next 2 weeks. Yeah, so that gives you a bit the picture. But today we want to discuss strategy next. And I would just like to briefly show you 2 slides. I will not say it all, but show you 2 slides on what the FIRESIDE Chat said. Verena has promised to send this presentation around to you. And I think this is kind of the synthesis, the summary of what was discussed there. And we would like to ask you in your presentations, in your interventions, to also maybe refer to these points. If you agree, whether you strongly agree, whether you disagree, because this is the meeting to give your view on this. And we would like to have your view in order to better plan and also to better advise proposers who want to come to our calls. So when we come from cloud to edge to IoT, we see that the IoT is becoming real time, and we see kind of a convergence between the smart IoT and cognitive cyber physical systems, from different communities. And therefore, what we see is a need for collaboration across constituency. And I think it's extremely important. In none of the topics or none of the initiatives we have, all of that is addressed. So we need the IoT community, we need the cloud community, the 5G community, the community of Excel and key digital technologies, and also the AI data robotics community. We don't need them all, but we need proper representatives of those communities in order to address this topic. This is also why this topic is not part of key digital technologies or any of those alliances, but of those initiatives, but it's a separate one because it cuts across. So we need orchestration, integration platforms, I said before, interoperability framework. They must be multi-vendor. I mean, in Europe, we don't want to support one. We want multi-vendor platforms. They must be open, and they should be provider agnostic. Yeah, so that I think is because we want a fair marketplace. Create a fair marketplace, and the key needs are platforms, ecosystems, trust. We have a special section on trust today, and a session, and interoperability. I already talked about swarm computing. Trust is extremely important. I've said connectivity, 5G. We talk about 5 years from now, so it's 5G and beyond. So it could be, it is, for example, 5G and the evolution into 6G, which will be more than 5G, but also it will be a matured 5G as we would expect today, and that's necessary for the real-time capabilities. Next. So if I go now on the strategic level, we need a European strategy to seize these opportunities. We cannot just do bottom-up research. So we need the next generation IoT and edge computing to create the Internet of Intelligence things. So the word at the L that summarizes is an Internet of Intelligence things. And that's the opportunity for Europe. And that's, I think, is the important point and the new thing, at the intersection of the cloud and IT world and the operational world. So that's what the word cyber physical systems already says, and so and other terms as well. So cloud IT world and operational world, and we are strong in the operational world. The edge cloud game is changing, and we believe the winner will be the one understanding the sectoral requirements, and that is what Europe is good at. So we have this strategic meeting today because we do not just want many projects, but we want a very small number of very strategic projects. So that's why we are having this kind of governance meeting in order to discuss that and to give guidance also to propose us what is important. So in terms of platforms, marketplaces, and digital sovereignty, sharing data is important, but we also need not only technology, but we need thinking around value creation, and that's marketplaces, business models. I said we need partnerships, and they are needed to develop those platforms and marketplaces, and because these things we in Europe cannot do alone. None of our companies is big enough to do it alone. None of our member states, even the biggest one, Germany, is not strong enough to do it alone. So, and GAIA-X shows that because it's a European initiative, we need this working across. So we need this collaboration between the digital and the industrial sectors, which I think Europe has to invest in. I think that's very important. We have started that with the digitizing European industry strategy, but we have to continue on this collaboration, and this collaboration has to take place within individual sectors, but also across sectors. Technology is a means and not an end. I think that's an important point. We have to think about things around, and digital sovereignty can be interpreted in two things. First of all, in general, it should avoid lock-in and lock-out effects towards non-European vendors who would get too much power, but also we have to be careful that we have we have competition on the European market to avoid local lock-in and lock-out effects. And clearly Europe is not alone. So we are looking at something that we want to develop that is for everybody. So we must address the worldwide market, obviously. Last slide, please. So our objectives here is we want to bring the 11 people discussion on a level with a broad constituency. We want to provide strategic level guidance through a publication of a report from this meeting. And we need your agreement that we use your statements in this report. We want to promote the EU initiative that we will launch around in the first 2 weeks of May. So we want to already promote it now. And we want to position this initiative vis-a-vis what I have said before are the deployment and infrastructure-oriented initiatives. And we want to discuss the research topic, the timeline, and the next steps, but that we do in the closing session. So I would really invite you to come to the closing session. And during the day, I would advise you to have a diagonal read of the fireside chat and comment on my sound bites from that meeting. That would be really helpful for us in order to better position the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Max. Again, a very dense and insightful presentation that is setting the tone for the day, and that has also reminded us about a number of things we will discuss. I think key for us today is the fact that it's an opportunity. This word must be in our ears and in our minds. And also, I think core principles such as orchestration, integration, and interoperability, because we want to allow diversity and openness within the ecosystem that we are creating.